If you have $4,000 in a typical American savings account today, earning the FDIC national average rate of 0.38%, your account will grow by approximately $15 this year. Inflation, currently running at 4.4% according to the IMF April 14th release, will reduce that same $4,000 by approximately $176 in purchasing power across the same year. You earn 15, you lose 161. The gap is silent. It does not show up on your bank statement. It does not generate a tax form. The bank tells you your money is growing. The bank is not lying. The bank is also not telling you what your money will buy in 12 months. Even if you have moved your savings to one of the highest yielding accounts in the country, paying 4.10 to 5% according to current bank rate and fortune data, you are still running negative real returns when oil sits at $107 per barrel and the Strait of Hormuz is closed. The same configuration produced the worst destruction of middle-class savings in modern American history starting in 1973. Henry Caldwell, 35 years old in 1974, machinist at a tire plant in Akron, Ohio, stood at his kitchen counter on a Saturday morning in November of that year, holding a passbook that paid 5.25% on his savings. He believed he was being responsible. He was wrong. And the cost of his being wrong shaped the financial life of his daughter and now sits on the kitchen counter of his grandson. My name is Diane. I have been reconstructing the savings rate trap across 3 generations of an American family using the FDIC's published national rate series going back to 1960, the Federal Reserve's FRED database for the Consumer Price Index across the same period, the Bankrate, NerdWallet, and Fortune surveys of current high-yield savings rates as of this week, the World Bank's purchasing power parity tables for cross-checking real returns, and the academic literature on financial repression compiled by economists Carmen Reinhart and M. Belen Sproncha in their 2015 International Monetary Fund working paper, The Liquidation of Government Debt. I'm going to walk you through 3 generations of one composite American family: grandfather Henry, daughter Diane, grandson Marcus, and show you what each generation's savings decisions cost or earned them in real purchasing power. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what gap you are standing inside right now, what the previous 2 generations did when they stood inside the same gap, and what the documented record says works in this configuration. Subscribe to the channel before we continue. Hit like. Share this with anyone who has a savings account, which is essentially everyone. Most of your friends and family are losing real purchasing power right now and do not know it. The information they need is not on their bank statement. It is in the difference between 2 numbers on the Federal Reserve website that almost nobody compares. Henry Caldwell, Generation 1, November 1974. Henry has saved approximately $7,200 over 12 years of working at the Goodyear plant in Akron. The money sits in a passbook savings account at his local savings and loan. The account pays 5.25% annual percentage yield, which is the maximum allowed under Regulation Q, the Federal Reserve regulation that capped savings account interest rates from 1933 until its phase-out beginning in 1980. Henry believes 5.25% is a good rate because it is the highest legal rate available. His father, who lived through the Great Depression, taught him that money belongs in a federally insured savings account. Henry has done what his father told him to do. Inflation in 1974 runs at 12.3%. Henry's $7,200 earns $378 in interest that year. Inflation eats $886 of purchasing power across the same year. Henry's real loss is $508 in a single year on his accumulated savings. Henry does not know this number. The bank statement does not show real returns. The newspaper reports inflation as a separate number from his savings rate. The connection between the 2 numbers is something Henry would have to compute himself, and he does not. He repeats the pattern in 1975, when inflation runs at 9.1% and his savings rate is still capped at 5.25%. He repeats it in 1976 and 1977 and 1978.
By 1979, with inflation at 13.3%, Henry's accumulated real loss across the decade reaches approximately $6,400 on his original $7,200. He has lost roughly 90% of his purchasing power on his accumulated savings while watching the nominal balance grow modestly. The pattern continues into 1980 and 1981.
By the time Volcker's tightening cycle finally breaks the inflation in 1983, Henry's $7,200 has nominal value of approximately $10,400, but purchasing power equivalent to approximately $3,100 in 1974 dollars. Henry has done everything his father told him to do. He has lost more than half of his life savings in real terms. He retires in 1988 believing he was a responsible saver. He dies in 2009 on a fixed income that has continued to lose real purchasing power across the intervening decades. The amount of capital that should have transferred to his daughter Diane was substantially smaller than what Henry himself had accumulated. The gap was the inheritance. It just was not the inheritance Henry intended. Diane Caldwell Park, Generation 2. Diane is born in 1958. She watches her father work through the 70s. She graduates nursing school in 1981. She marries in 1984 and starts saving for a house. By 1995, she is 37 years old, a registered nurse at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and has accumulated approximately $22,000 in savings split between a money market account paying 4.5% and a savings account paying 2.8%. Inflation in 1995 runs at 2.5%. Diane's real returns on the money market portion are positive, approximately 2% real after inflation. The savings account portion runs slightly positive real as well. Diane does not face the trap her father faced because the inflation environment of the 1990s is structurally different. She also has access to financial information her father did not have. She subscribes to Money Magazine. She uses an early version of personal finance software called Quicken. She reads articles about the importance of asset allocation. In 1996, she opens her first individual retirement account at Vanguard and begins contributing $2,000 per year. By 2005, she has built her IRA to approximately $48,000, primarily in equity mutual funds, and her cash savings to approximately $70,000 across a savings account, a money market, and a certificate of deposit. Diane has done what the financial press of her era told her to do. She has diversified, she has used tax-advantaged accounts, and she has held cash for emergencies. The lesson Diane took from her father's experience was the wrong lesson. The lesson she took was diversification. The lesson she should have taken was that real interest rates can run negative for a decade, and that nothing inside the conventional financial advisory framework will reliably warn you when that period begins. Between 2008 and 2022, Diane's cash positions earned an average of 0.3 to 1.1% annually, while inflation ran at 1.5 to 7% depending on the year. Her real losses on cash across that 14-year period accumulated to approximately $11,000 on a roughly stable $70,000 cash balance. Her IRA in equities performed adequately across the same period, roughly tracking the S&P 500, and she retired in 2023 at age 65 with approximately $310,000 across all accounts. The retirement is workable. It is not what she had planned. The plan had been $400,000. The gap between the plan and the reality is largely the cumulative real loss on the cash portion across the financial repression decade. Diane did not understand financial repression. The term did not appear in Money Magazine. It did appear in academic papers by Reinhardt and Spronka. Those papers were not on Diane's reading list. She did better than her father. She still left money on the table that her son will need.
Marcus Park, Generation 3. You, or someone like you. Marcus is 29 years old in 2026. He lives in Cincinnati. He works in software quality assurance at a regional firm. He has accumulated approximately $18,000 in savings across an emergency fund and a moving up to a house fund. The emergency fund, $6,000, sits in his everyday checking account at a national bank that pays an effective rate of approximately 0.01%. The remaining $12,000 sits in a savings account at the same bank paying 0.38%. Marcus has been told by his parents to save. He has done that. He has not been told to compare his savings rate to inflation. Inflation right now is 4.4% according to the IMF April 14th release. Marcus's real return on his $18,000 across the next 12 months will be approximately negative 4%, roughly $720 of purchasing power destroyed across a year in which his nominal balance grew by approximately $71. Marcus is repeating his grandfather's mistake. The mechanism is identical. The numbers are smaller in absolute terms because Marcus is younger and has less accumulated capital. The mechanism is the same. Marcus's grandfather Henry lost real purchasing power because he believed 5.25% was a good rate when inflation was 12.3%. Marcus is losing real purchasing power because he believes a savings account at his bank is responsible when the rate is 0.38 and inflation is 4.4. The framework that produced both losses is the same framework. It is the framework that says cash in a federally insured savings account is the safe choice. The framework was wrong in 1974. It is wrong in 2026. It will be wrong in any environment where inflation runs above the prevailing savings rate. The federally insured part is correct. Marcus will not lose his nominal $18,000 to a bank failure. The safe part is the lie. The bank guarantees the nominal balance. Nothing guarantees the purchasing power. Now here's the part the financial press is not connecting for the audience that needs it most. Carmen Reinhart and M. Belen Sprancia, in academic work published through the National Bureau of Economic Research and the International Monetary Fund in the early 2010s, gave a name to this mechanism. The name is financial repression. Their research documented that between 1945 and 1980, the United States and most other advanced economies systematically engineered negative real interest rates as a tool to reduce the burden of government debt accumulated during World War II. The mechanism worked. United States debt to GDP fell from 121% in 1945 to 33% by 1974. The reduction was financed almost entirely by transferring purchasing power from savers to the government through the gap between savings rates and inflation. The transfer was not described as a tax because no tax form was filed. It functioned as a tax in every way that mattered. Savers paid it whether they knew they were paying it or not. The mechanism is worth understanding precisely. When the federal government issues debt at 3% and inflation runs at 6%, the real cost of that debt to the government is negative 3% annually. The lender, typically a saver, a pension fund, or a bank holding the bond on behalf of depositors, receives 3% in nominal interest while losing 6% in purchasing power, for a real loss of 3%. The government's debt obligation in real terms shrinks by 3% every year the gap persists. Across a decade, sustained real rate suppression of 3% reduces the real value of debt by roughly 26% through compounding alone, before any nominal repayment. Reinhart and Sprancia calculated that financial repression contributed approximately 3 to 4% of GDP per year to United States debt reduction across the post-war period. That is the size of a major tax program. It was administered through interest rate caps under Regulation Q, through Federal Reserve policies that held real rates negative, and through restrictions on what assets banks could hold. The program ended formally in the early 1980s when Volcker broke the inflation. The mechanism is now being reassembled.
The Reinhart-Sprancia research is publicly available at imf.org and nebr.org. It is approximately 50 pages. It is not classified. It is not paywalled. The paper's central conclusion is that whenever sovereign debt levels rise above approximately 100% of GDP, governments historically resort to financial repression as a fiscal tool. United States federal debt is currently approximately 123% of GDP. The conditions Reinhart and Sprancia identified as triggers for financial repression are present right now. The mechanism that destroyed Henry Caldwell's savings between 1973 and 1980 is a deliberate fiscal tool that the United States and other advanced economies have used before, that academic economists have explicitly named, and that the current debt configuration is consistent with.
Your financial advisor has not described the current environment in these terms. Your bank has not described the current environment in these terms. The mainstream financial press will use the phrase only in occasional opinion pieces tucked behind paywalls. The phrase is not promoted because the phrase changes the framework. Once you know the name of the mechanism that is destroying your purchasing power, the conventional advice, keep cash at a savings account, stops sounding like prudence and starts sounding like compliance with a fiscal program that is taking money from you to reduce the government's debt burden. The advice has not changed in 50 years because the mechanism it serves has not changed. What has changed is that you can now look up the mechanism by name. The papers exist. The data exists. The historical record across 3 generations of the Caldwell family exists. Third, gold exchange-traded funds. SPDR Gold Shares, ticker GLD, is the largest physically backed gold ETF in the world. iShares Gold Trust, ticker IAU, is mechanically nearly identical to GLD, with a lower expense ratio of approximately 25 basis points versus 40 for GLD. Both are eligible for traditional and Roth IRAs. Both can be purchased through any brokerage account. The historical record across the last 50 years shows that during periods when real interest rates run negative, exactly the configuration we are inside right now, gold has historically advanced. Gold rose 900% during the Henry Caldwell decade. Gold rose 145% during the most recent 15-year financial repression period. The mechanism is not magic. When cash loses purchasing power, capital flows to assets whose supply cannot be expanded by central bank policy. Gold is the largest such asset. Position sizing matters. The historical record does not say move all of your savings to gold. The historical record says hold some portion in instruments that do not lose purchasing power when cash does. A saver with $10,000 in savings might consider $3,000 in a high-yield account for emergency liquidity, $3,000 in I-bonds for medium-term real yield protection, and $4,000 in a gold ETF for long-term purchasing power preservation. That is one possible allocation. It is not a recommendation. It is the kind of allocation the Caldwell family across 3 generations would have benefited from understanding. Henry Caldwell stood at his kitchen counter in Akron in November 1974 holding a passbook that paid 5.25%. He thought he was being responsible. He lost half his life savings in real terms. Diane Caldwell Park stood at her kitchen counter in Cincinnati in 1995, managing a money market account paying 4.5%. She did better than her father. She still left meaningful capital on the table by not understanding financial repression as a mechanism. Marcus Park stands at his kitchen counter in Cincinnati right now, holding a phone showing a savings account paying 0.38%. The account is at the same bank his mother used. The bank pays the national average rate. The rate is below inflation. Marcus has roughly 30 minutes of work in front of him to close most of the gap. A high-yield online savings account application takes 10 to 15 minutes. A Treasury Direct account for I-bonds takes another 15 if he does not already have one. Total time investment, approximately 30 to 40 minutes across one weekend afternoon. The work is not difficult. The information is not hidden. The framework that prevents most savers from doing the work is the same framework that prevented Henry from doing it in 1974 and Diane from doing it in 2015. The framework says cash in a savings account is responsible. The framework is wrong when real rates run negative. Real rates run negative right now. The Caldwell family has paid this lesson 3 times across 3 generations. The 4th payment is optional. The gap is the inheritance. What you do with it is the only variable you control. This is Ban. The gap is the inheritance.